You still regret the last thing that you said to them. Reddit. Who are they and what was said? I was raised with this stupid mentality that men don't cry. We don't show feelings or anything. My best friend of 9 years was my dog, Kramer. It was clear that he was physically not well. I had saved him from the pound and had to put him on IV at the vet for 3 days when we first got him. He was my best friend. He helped me when I was going through a tough breakup. When we took him to vet for the last time, the vet said the most humane thing would be to euthanize him. He couldn't walk and was in a lot of pain. I saw him for the last time in the vet's small office. The vet asked if I wanted to be by his side when they did it. I felt emotions pouring through me and I just couldn't do it. I didn't want my brother and parents to see me cry and I said no. I'll never forget seeing his face for the last time. It has burned a hole in my memory. I love him so much. I love you, Kramer. That experience has made me into a better person, better pet owner, better father and husband. It showed me that the fake machismo we have preached for generations is such bulls. Men have feelings. Dogs have feelings. We should behave as such. Regardless, this one memory crushes me every time I think about it. In fact, I'm here crying just writing this. I'm so sorry this happened. It's kind of gut-wrenching to think about. All you can do is forgive yourself, and moving forward act the way that you wish you were to that day. I'm sure Kramer has forgiven you by now, and hey, you'll see him again someday, in some way, shape or form. Stories like these have just cemented that if I ever need to put my cat down, I'll be with him all the way. It's not what I said, but what I didn't do. When I moved to a new town, I made friends with the woman across the alley. She was great, was wonderful with my kids, taught me how to drive and even took classes to be able to talk to me in my native language. My first and best friend here. One Saturday morning, I went outside and she was standing by her door, shouting something at me. I didn't understand and yelled back what. She repeated what she had said, but again. I couldn't hear it and replied what again. Her last words to me were never mind. A short time later she drove off. 3 days later I reported her missing. 10 days later they found her, dead in her tent in the woods. Her dog guarding her body. Suicide. I regret not walking across the yard to hear what she was saying. I feel for you. I hope you are able to forgive yourself. Life hurts sometimes. Sorry for your loss. It's more about what wasn't said. The last time I spoke with my mom in 2018. It was the night before she went in for heart surgery. The whole conversation lasted 2 minutes. I could tell she was scared and she kept pausing as if there was more she wanted to say, or more that she wanted me to say. I was so nonchalant. This wasn't her first heart procedure and I figured it would just be another notch in her belt. She didn't make it, and I live with the regret that I brushed off our last conversation. This is probably my grief playing tricks on my memory, but I still think about how defeated she sounded when we ended the call and hate myself for it. I'd hate myself too, so I can't say I blame you. I didn't know your mom, obviously, but something tells me that she wouldn't want you to hate yourself. You made a mistake and that mistake wasn't something that would make her love you any less. So, if not for yourself, try to forgive yourself for her. It's most likely what she would have wanted. 3. Told a friend she was under the limit. She was. After she crashed and died they tested her blood alcohol level and she was legal to drive. Wish I'd told her to leave her car though. It's not your fault, and you couldn't have known that would happen, and I'm sorry that happened. Last time I saw my ex was the whole breakup conversation. We both were super mature, calm, and mutually told each other no hard feelings. My last words to him were, I know you're a good person. The next girl will be lucky to have you. Freaking lying. Gaslighting piece of crap. I had no idea he'd been cheating on me for the last year prior. We were long distance, so I didn't know about the girls staying over. Didn't know he'd been getting nudes from people on Reddit through Snapchat. Found out from his roommate years later about the girls. I found out about the Snapchat from Reddit ironically. Saw his username pop up in a conversation in a women's subreddit about a creep harassing women asking for nudes. The dumbass used the same username across Reddit, Snapchat, Instagram, and gamer tags, so I instantly knew the women were talking about him. I honestly felt so vindicated with that. He'd told me I was crazy when I asked why his Snapchat score was growing so high when we barely snapped each other. He told me his friends used it a lot. I wish my last words to him were calling him out on his crap, actually being crazy and loud, and not granting him a clean nice breakup. Told an ex she couldn't come upstate and live with me for a while while she got through the things she was struggling with. I wouldn't have minded, but she was in a vulnerable state. I was worried she would regain feelings for me that I couldn't reciprocate, and it would just cause her to spiral more. She ended up killing herself later that night. The latter part of the first paragraph was very mature of you, and in a way, you were looking out for her. The last sentence is gut-wrenching, I'm sure. Very sad and sorry you went through that. No thanks. I don't want anything. Relatives I was visiting. I wanted food, but dang this lying tongue and embarrassed feeling. I dated a girl for a long time. Like 5 or 6 years. She wanted to go for a higher degree and we moved across my state. Montana is freaking huge, this wasn't a small move, and set up shop there. A month later she had started cheating on me. I knew the guy and had a bad feeling about him, but I chalked it up to he's freaking my girlfriend, of course you hate him. I left in July to move back home, tail between my legs. December of that year rolled around and she started trying to talk to me. Turns out, he'd been religiously beating the crap out of her for a month or so, hadn't let her pursue her degree, didn't let her go out without him, and didn't work. She had to pay for everything. She wanted to move back in with me to get away. I felt a flash of rage. To paraphrase, I thought to myself, you made your bed, go get freaking by and butthole in it. I wasn't that directly mean to her. I said, name, you picked this man over me, and I cannot ever trust you again. Here are the numbers for some women's shelters in your town. Then I cut all contact. That was years ago. Nobody has heard from her in a long time. None of the people I met there that I kept in contact with. None of her lifelong friends I know now. She vanished. I hated her. I still mostly do. I do hope she's alive and safe though. No way to know. IDK, that seems really justified to me. I wouldn't feel guilty about that. Spring of 2007. I had just turned 18 years old. I am a lifelong atheist, but I was going through my requisite edgelord phase at the time that this happened. My grandpa was dying of lung cancer at the tender age of 65. 2 packs of unfiltered Camels a day will do that to you, but I digress. The man was a kind soul who had been devoutly religious for his entire life after having a near-death encounter as a child. While my grandpa was genuinely a good person, I was still at the stage of being a young atheist where I felt the need to correct others when they said things like so and so is in a better place now. During my last cogent and coherent discussion that I ever had with him, he tried to tell me that he'd see me again someday and that it was all going to be okay. In my infinite edgelord wisdom, I decided to correct him and let him know that I would not, in fact, be seeing him again and that this was it. Needless to say, this was more than mildly upsetting to him and I was asked to leave the room by my grandma. Grandpa started slipping away the next day and was given so many drugs that he was completely incoherent. I am still deeply ashamed of my last conversation with someone who deserved better. It wouldn't have killed me to humor him and let him know that I was looking forward to meeting him again. TLDR. I told my dying grandpa that there was no afterlife and that I wouldn't be seeing him again, ever. I'm so sorry this weighs heavy on your mind after all this time. We all wish there were a rewind button on some of life's choices we made. If your grandpa was the kind soul you described, he's forgiven you. Now forgive yourself. My mom. She was in a lot of pain and I used to help her with a lot of things. Get her medicines and go to the doctor together. One day she was very sick and she started bleeding for some reason and we called my sister for help. I used to live alone with her and I have a college student's age still. And I remember that she said something like, "Mom, Ari, I think I'm really dying this time." Me. Don't say that, Mom. Oh my god. It's fine. You're gonna be okay. We'll call my sister and we'll go to the hospital, alright? Honestly, that happened on this late the 13th of October. She passed away next morning and I felt awful because I sounded like I was taking the importance away of the situation when it was a bad thing. I did care and I regret it a lot. You did what you needed to, calling your sister, and you minimizing changed nothing to her health situation. What it did probably do is reassure her and alleviate her stress and anxiety a little. It was a kindness, really. I didn't say anything to anyone. I saw all the signs and didn't say anything because I thought since he was going with his best friend, he would be okay. Now he's gone, his family is destroyed, and his best friend hasn't been able to function normally in 10 years. This is gonna sound super freaking corny, but I really regret the last thing I told my parents. They both died in a plane crash when I was 10, and the last thing I told them was I wish you a terrible time because they didn't take me with them. Next thing I know is my uncle coming into my room telling me what happened. I'm so terribly sorry. I'm sure they knew you were just saying it cause you were upset and they know you love them. I called my cat a dingus after he punted a cup off a table. I'll make up with him later today when I've simmered down. Thanks for the break and relative deaths. After all the sadness, it's good to read something funny. I dunno. I regret saying stuff all the time. I only hear it after I said it: a lot of the time the other person probably doesn't even think it's that weird or thinks that much of it. But I feel embarrassed every time I say something that I wish I didn't. I know many people will have something regarding people who have died. This is just kind of related. It is something that I learnt a long time ago with regards to sick people and or elderly people. If ever you get a feeling to visit or talk to someone who is sick or elderly, then do it. Often you may be too busy, you just want to finish this project or get this task done. Just go and do it. It really may be the last time see that person. I know that during COVID, it's not easy, but then pick up the phone and call. Parent-child relationships can be fraught, but so often once the parent is no longer there is regret that they did not make that last visit, that the last memories was not being there in some way or form. Dad was an alcoholic my whole life. I was 18 when I had to admit him to the ER for his last week of life. He never wanted to get help for his addiction, open up about it, nothing. Got to a point where I took on his own traits of pretending the addiction wasn't there and everything was fine. When he was laying in the hospital bed for the last coherent time, he held my hand and looked me in the eyes and said, "Everything is fine. I'm going to be okay." I think I finally just realized the reality of the situation and lashed out and said, "No, it's not, Dad. Look at you. Jaundiced, swollen feet, all other traits of stage 4 liver cirrhosis." He went into a coma shortly thereafter and passed away later that week. It's a tough gig to grow up in that environment. Be kind to yourself and one day you will forgive him. I never thought I would, but it happened. It was my dad. I told him I called the rescue squad and they are on the way. I'm going to grab my keys and move my car so the squad can get closer to the door. My mom came out screaming that he had stopped breathing. In the short time it took to move my car roughly 50 feet or so from the driveway into the yard, he had completely stopped breathing. I worked on him until medical services arrived, but he didn't make it. If I knew that was going to be the last time I ever spoke to him, I would have said something a lot more than "I'm moving my car so the rescue squad could get closer." I think that he knew how much you loved him. So much that you wanted the rescue squad to come faster. Don't be so hard on yourself. 2 years ago I snapped and yelled at my dad, "Show some love to your wife. That's the least you could do. She is my mother and was in a hospital in the ICU." He wouldn't come with me to see her at the hospital and meet the doctor to discuss the diagnosis. I now know him to be a person who is scared of hospitals and terrified of having to listen to bad news. My mother is fine and alive. My dad is too. We never spoke about it and I just regret snapping like I did. It's not too late, dude. You still have time to apologize. I told my boyfriend at the time, "You look half dead," because I was angry with him and couldn't find him for 2 days. I knew he was out partying. And when he said "next time I won't be," I genuinely thought that he was apologizing for looking like a still drunk slob. So I ignored him and went to work. He hung himself that night. It was a joke as I passed her in the morning. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was about my dog. She did her polite "that's not funny" laugh, and I went back to bed. We found her a couple hours later. She had taken her own life. I regret not slowing down a second to realize, to have a longer good morning chat. I regret. I was trying to decipher my FIL's sign language due to his disease. He kept pointing to his chest and then to me. He said I love you. I finally figured it out and got distracted with one of my animals breaking or something. I never said it back and he passed away the next day. It freaking tears my soul apart. He treated me like gold. He ran circles around my own dad. I know he was my FIL, but he was my light at the end of a dark tunnel. IDK if I'll ever be able to find a light again. You were lucky to know him. I'm sure he was happy to utter those last words to you. That is gold. My dad died when I was 17. He was a bad man. He was abusive. I hadn't talked to him in over a year before his death. I remember going to the hospital and seeing him hooked up to all of these machines. His skin was yellow, and I was told he needed a kidney transplant and a liver transplant. He had finally drank himself to organ failure. He went in because he couldn't pee, and less than 24 hours later he was in a coma. A week later he was dead. My last words that I know he heard were I hate you, and I did mean it when I said it. But I regret it, because if I knew that would be the last thing he heard from his child, I wouldn't have said it. I would have told him I loved him, because even though he abused me, he was my dad, and in my own way I would always love him. No doubt you loved him and that he loved you. The experiences you shared just hid those feelings. You likely felt the loss more because of your negative experiences. No one is prepared for loss. Be kind to yourself. I told my ex-BF over the phone one night how it was a little selfish and it seemed he didn't care about my sleep, and since I had work in the morning to let me sleep, but he convinced me to stay on and fall asleep on the phone. Him. And I remember waking up at 6 AM for work and hung up the phone thinking he went to sleep. I found out a week later, after thinking he was ghosting me, that he overdosed that night. He was on the phone with me and shooting up at the same time, and I wonder what the last thing he was thinking was. I was mad at him for wanting to stay on the phone and felt so selfish after. It was just a conversation about a frog. A few days later he passed away in a car crash. I didn't think that would be our last conversation would be that. That's a worthy last conversation topic. He was my best friend. He had cancer and was dying. I was in love with him since the day I met him, but I never had the guts to tell him. Also, I didn't know his disease was that serious and had no idea he was dying. I was a teenager at the time. He told me, while he was at the hospital, that he loved me and wanted to be with me. I didn't know how to react, so I told him that I didn't love him, that he was crazy for thinking that we could be together, and I also said he was stupid. He went into a coma the next week and died a month later. Every day I wake up and I regret not telling him I loved him, and now it's 8 years too late. I think you just tried to protect yourself at this moment. You were just a teenager. I told my server at Denny's that I wanted a tuna melt. Decided too late that I was more in the mood for a turkey club. The memory still haunts me. Man, I'm really sorry. Stuff like that hurts, but it's so incredibly human to err like that. I went to therapy for something similar after I ordered an Oreo Sonic Blast instead of an M&M one. The thing my therapist said that sticks with me is, you're supposed to climb the mountain, not carry it. Good luck on your journey, brother. The one thing I can think of is when my grandfather was in the last stage of cancer. We knew he was going to die of it, and I stupidly asked if he was good instead of how he was doing. Later I felt really bad because I knew he wasn't okay. Some weeks later he died. I was 15 or 16. 10 years later I still about it. You were just a kid. Don't beat yourself up. More what I didn't say, I wish I hadn't ghosted my ex. But to this day I still have no idea what I would even say to them. It's something I think about way too often. I told them I missed them on a video call after helping them a metric fuck ton. I've made mistakes, but I know I've been a great person overall and have given way more than they deserve. They heard what I said, waved through the screen, and hung up. I regret saying that because of the pain it causes me, and I should have seen it coming. More what I didn't say. Had a lot of good people that wanted to be closer with me and we could have been good friends now, but I was too deep into my depression and would often not respond when people wrote to me. I regret it a lot. I had a game near home for college hockey and I went all the way home because my dog was not doing well after getting into some gum that was toxic. I said to my dog of 5 years that we had a lot of catching up on playtime to do when I came home and saw him the night before the game. The next day I scored my first college goal in a regionals game to out us up 1-0, and to this day I've earned the characteristic of being a big game player or scoring in big games only. The day after that they put my dog down at only 5 years old, who was my first ever dog, so I was devastated. Thought that goal was his final gift to me always. I had a crush on a boy from daycare. We showed our affection for each other by antagonizing one another throughout the school year. The last thing I ever said to him was that I hope we did not have 4th grade together. He was hit by a drunk driver a week later, and I regret those words to this day, even though 30 years have passed. Told an ex just and blocked them when they said we need to break up, even after they said they wanted to be on good terms. I regret it so much because they were so nice and I wanted to at least be able to be friends, but no, I didn't even say anything except for a simple "oh." I had a friend recently pass this year of a drug overdose. Him and I had stopped talking after we graduated high school, but about a week before he died he texted me asking for a ride home because he wasn't sober. I didn't think much of it because I didn't know that had become a lifestyle to him, and it was 2 AM and he was a whole city away. I told him, "Sorry man, it's really late and I can't just drive and pick you up because you're messed up. You're like a whole hour and a half away." 2 weeks later I heard he overdosed, and I hate that that was the last time I spoke to him. I wish I said more. I wish I picked him up and I wish I could have helped him. Moral of the story: don't dismiss people's poor life choices. All it takes is one bad night. Daycare worker scolded a 2-year-old for running around and not putting on his hat when going outside. Was picked up by his mom right after. My colleague handed that day, CPS decided to take the toddler from his family. I broke down about the whole situation, but especially the thought that the last thing I said to the kid was a grumpy "put on your hat." Thankfully, I got the chance to properly say goodbye and he was taken a couple of days later. It was a reminder to never part with someone on bad terms. You can't be certain to speak with them again. The night after my grandfather died I dreamt we were all sitting in our living room talking and he was there. He kept talking and I slowly got more and more angry. Then finally I screamed at him, "Shut up, you're supposed to be dead," and he disappeared. Not a real conversation, but that's been kinda burned into me ever since. When I was 21, my mother had a cyst that burst internally and morphed into a flesh-eating bacteria. Before her first surgery, she had 3, but was never conscious after the first. She asked me if she was going to die. I said no. She never woke up. 13 days from the 911 call to her passing. That was January 1996 and it still haunts me to this day, especially during the holidays as her birthday was Christmas Eve. Some random person on Twitter. I didn't say anything, I just flashed gore at them because I was getting annoyed. I freaking regret it and I want to go back to earlier today where I didn't even reply to the post. When I was younger, I was not medicamented for my social anxiety and it turned into suicidal thoughts. I still remember me blowing up on my parents for no reason because I was scared to go to school since it was hard for me to make friends. A few weeks before Christmas I remember telling my mother that I would stay alive just for Christmas. It made her cry so badly and I never saw her cry. I still regret saying that even if now we are alright and so is my mental state. It was inconsiderate and selfish of me to say that. A girl I briefly dated in college. I was like 20. I was low and a bit unstable, and she had recently dumped me. I showed up to her dorm. "Well, if you could just talk to me about the times you were assaulted as a child, I think we can figure out how to make this work." I'm not really sure what the heck my rationale was for saying that. I was in a lot of pain after having been wrapped up in fantasies of what our relationship could be and looking to somehow make sense of it. That's where I landed. It was pretty messed up. Masculinity actually can be pretty fragile, and I feel like a total crap heel for not having the emotional maturity to handle that better. My former best friend of many years. Okay, well, if you don't wanna be here anymore and go home, then leave. She was supposed to stay at my house for a sleepover, but at 10 PM she suddenly changed her mind and wanted to go home. I know it was such a stupid thing to argue about, but I was so upset. I just wanted her to sleep over. I was so excited. Keep seeing her in the bus and I never know how to act, but I mostly try to not pay attention to her, but in the end I catch myself thinking would she still be friends with me if I asked her, and it's sad. Sent a suicide note to my ex-girlfriend. Haven't talked to her since. Actually glad we broke up because my mental health has gotten much better since. Me and my cousin never really was close. He was older. We used to argue a lot, and the last time I saw him, I must have been 14. We was arguing and he said something that upset me. Then I shouted at him that I wish he would die. We didn't see each again. 2 years later I was told he had to be rushed to hospital because he had took an overdose. His liver was that badly damaged that they had to transfer him hospitals for a transplant, but he died just as he reached that hospital. He was on his own. Even though we didn't get along, I still loved him. This is one of my biggest regrets. If I could get one chance to see him, I would tell him I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it. I just hope he's at peace now. A coworker at my last job named Dottie worked in auto sales. Taroons of guys around there and we all liked to be snarky with each other to keep the work environment interesting. Hazing kind of thing. Everyone was sarcastic and liked to joke, but we were all cool with each other and everyone in the building interacted with each other regularly. Dottie was the main secretary in the office, interacting with the customers, getting their cars serviced, and was legitimately one of the sweetest people in the building. Always lovely to be around. Was on a roll of witty one-liners with my co-workers while walking through the building, headed over to go on an errand run and said definitely the wrong freaking thing to her passively while on my way out. Came back a half hour later to learn I made her cry. This was close to the holidays and I had a vacation that was about to start. Was canned for other reasons I don't really care to get into, but part of me definitely thinks that didn't help. I never got to go back and apologize to her. She wasn't working the day I came back to collect papers and some of my things. Last thing I ever said to her was a sarcastic, unfiltered insult to her character she never deserved to hear because I couldn't turn off my snark. I feel awful thinking about it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.